All right, so I recently met with a friend that I knew as a kid, and we were talking, and they randomly said to me, they're like, dude, you're way different than you used to be, but you're also the same. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, well, the way that you carry yourself is way different, but at your core, you're the same kind of silly dude who kind of always had big dreams and did whatever he wanted to do type stuff, right? And so I thought that was interesting because since I had known that person, I've went through like 6 or 7 different identities since that point, right? When I met him, I was a child and I was actually BMX racing. So a lot of people don't know that I won a BMX state championship when I was 10. So I used to do bike racing a lot. Then I stopped doing that. Then I started playing basketball, right? Then I played basketball in college and I ended my identity as an athlete. Then I started doing business, right? Then I was partying a little bit. Then I stopped partying. So I've gone through all these different identities and I've played all these different roles. You know, I've been employee, business owner, introverted to extroverted, and you can play with identities like a Rolodex, right? It's like it's a deck of cards that you have that you can flip through. So I would say one of my biggest skills is I don't let identities, how I see myself, ever hold me back. So I have no problem moving to a new level or leaving something that's harming me behind or changing everything about my life or changing everything about what I identify with in the snap of fingers, right? Because you look at me when I'm 18 and I was a basketball player. So if you told me to tell you my story about my life, it would have been through the lens of a basketball player. It would have been through the lens of an athlete because that was my whole life, right? Now, if you ask me what I do and who I am, basketball player doesn't even come up. So people don't even know that I played sports anymore because I've let that story, that narrative die, okay? And there's a lot of stories and narratives that I can choose to bring up and highlight or I can let die because I am the individual, I am the thing that encompasses all these different identities, that encompasses all these different narratives, right? Because ultimately an identity is simply a way that you view yourself that's hinged upon narratives that is held together by specific data points that you try to remember in your own mind, okay? So here's how to leave an old identity behind. What I want to walk through is the basic process that happens when you are transitioning out of an old identity and how to actually double down on it because the worst thing that you want to have and be is somebody who's hung up on the past and who's doing a bunch of stuff, right? One example of this is my TikTok following, right? So a lot of you guys, you might not even know I have like 700,000 TikTok followers. Why? Because it's not a part of my personality. I never really gave a fuck. You know what I mean? I was just a guy that wanted to be creative and make a bunch of content. So people will randomly be like, oh man, you're famous on TikTok, or you do this and that. It's interesting because I don't even think about any of that stuff because I don't identify with it. Again, I identify with me. I am the individual, I am the thing that encompasses all these different things, encompasses all these different narratives or achievements or whatever you want to call them, accomplishments. And I'm the thing that is all of them simultaneously, right? And so you can pick and choose what you want to identify with, and you can hinge your identity on any of these things. Now, one piece of advice I will give you is it would behoove you to hinge your identity on things that last throughout time and things that aren't in unwinnable games. For example, a lot of men hook their identity on how much money that they make, okay? The problem with doing that is that's only gonna work when you're around people poorer than you. If you hinge your identity and therefore your confidence and therefore your emotional regulator of whether you feel good or not on money, there's always going to be somebody richer than you, okay? And so when that moment comes, inevitably, you're going to feel like shit, you're going to feel small, you're going to feel like your identity is being attacked. What you can actually do is you can not hinge your identity on things that are external, okay? You don't hinge your identity on fashion, you don't hinge your identity on how much money you make, you don't hinge your identity on anything other than who you are as a person internally, and do you keep the promises to yourself, and are you living the life that you want to live, okay? And are you stylistically abiding by your own North Star and your own compass? If that's what you hinge your identity to, then it doesn't matter what situation you're in life, you're always going to be that guy, you're always going to feel like that guy, no matter what room you step into, because you have hitched your identity on something that is not only real, but something that continues throughout time that also can't be minimized based on other people because you're not measuring a certain specific metric. Does that make sense? So if you hinge your identity to yourself and who you are, you can never lose that. Now, for example, when I was playing basketball, I was a basketball player. And I identified as a basketball player. And so I took pride in my basketball skills. And now the backside of that is if there was somebody who's better at basketball than me, I was like, dang, I'm not as good as them. And I would be sad about it, right? I mean, I wouldn't be sad about it. I didn't really care, but you get my point. whatever you identify with, you have to be conscious of what you're identifying with, and you have to also be aware of if what you're identifying is within an unwinnable game. And the unwinnable games that I'm talking about are you realistically going to be the richest person in the world? No. And even if you are, you're not going to be the richest person forever. So you might be the richest person for 10 years, if that's your goal, but then on year 12, somebody's going to be richer than you, and you're going to lose, okay? So the point I'm making here is ask yourself right now, what do I identify as? A business owner, a man, you could be political, you could, whatever you identify as, ask yourself, is that a game that is going to continue throughout time? Okay, does that thing continue? And is it a game of one? Meaning, is this a you thing, or is it an external identity that comes with all these other little packages, all these other slivers of personality that you are forced to abide by and role play because it's technically what the identity is all about, right? So for example, when I was 11 years old, I was a basketball player, right? Now, when I was growing up, I was the only white kid on this team of like 300 black kids, okay? And one thing that we did culturally is you would never smile when you'd score, and you would never show emotion, and you never really were silly, kind of. I mean, you kind of were, and I was, but it wasn't really culturally acceptable. So basketball player meant you're kind of cool, you're kind of nonchalant. That kind of came with the rep, right? So what would happen is if you were in that sphere, if you were in that culture of basketball and you weren't like that, you would probably be clowned or you'd get kind of outcasted, right? Now, here's the problem with that is when I was younger, I can call myself a basketball player, but that behavior that was really just implicit, meaning nobody explicitly said you can't be silly, but it was just kind of an implicit behavior that was rewarded or punished based on how you're supposed to act. That kind of gets accepted into the identity of basketball player, right? So not only is it, oh my God, that plays basketball, but there's a whole attitude and there's a paradigm, there's a perspective along with that you kind of download tangentially based on, the environment that you're in, okay? So the question is, was that actually me or was I just acting a certain way? Ultimately, it doesn't really matter because all you want to do is ask yourself, is this behavior something I like or not, all right? The only reason I mention that story is because when you're labeling off what you identify with and as, try to pay attention to other implicit behaviors and attitudes and perspectives that come along with that thing that you might be role playing that might not actually be you, right? And the way that you know it's not you is if you feel a lot of internal tension for that thing, right? And then if you feel that internal tension, realize you don't have to just fake it and do something you don't want to do. You can always create your unique combination of things to be uniquely you, okay? And people think being yourself is some random whatever. No, it's just following your instinct naturally, and it's going to tell you where to go, okay? Right? Like if I like a lot of things that other people like, but then I also don't like other things that other people like, and they box me into those perceptions, right? For example, I have an audience online, but it's a byproduct of me just being creative and like to share stuff, right? There's a lot of people where they grow an audience online because they're super insecure and they want all the validation and stuff, and that's what they love, and then they think I'm that, so then they'll have conversations with me or they'll answer conversations with me with that kind of language, and I'm just thinking like, bro, we not the same. I'm listening to what they're saying, I'm listening to how they speak, I'm listening to their language, and I'm just thinking in my head, we are not the same, buddy. We ain't the same thing. You know what I mean? So, same external thing, which is, you go to following, completely different ways of life, completely different perspectives, completely different value systems, completely different value hierarchies, completely different ways of operating. It's all completely different, right? And that is hinged on identity. It is hinged on how you see yourself. Now, in your life, one of the most beautiful things about life is your identity is going to morph a lot, okay? And I think that's one of the best things ever. I actually don't like to think about a life where I don't evolve from an identity perspective, right? For example, you could be a business owner, but maybe you go from a small business owner to a big business owner, right? There's an evolution there, and then maybe you go to an owner, maybe you go to whatever. There's different evolutions. You're playing different roles. You're wearing different hats in your life. To me, that is very colorful. That is very exciting. I love the thought of that. I hate the thought of not moving my identity ever. I hate the thought of playing the exact same way in the same game, in the same role forever. I really don't like that, okay? And don't get that confused with me sitting in my lane of life or playing to my strengths, okay? These are very different things because in every situation, you're going to have your strengths, you're going to have your weaknesses, but they're going to manifest very differently. So your day-to-day life is going to look and feel very different depending on what role you're in, what season of life you're in, all these different things. Okay, so how to leave an old identity behind. I gave a lot of context there, but it's very simple. So the first thing you have to realize is, what do you currently identify with? Now, here's when you know that it's time to leave an old identity behind. You got to recognize that it already died, all right? And you're going to feel this. So for example, when I quit playing basketball, one of the most difficult parts about that was psychologically de-identifying with basketball player, with athlete. That was extremely difficult for me. It took me like a year and a half to get over because I had nothing to grab onto. If I'm not an athlete, what am I? Am I a student? Am I a human? What am I? Okay, and ultimately what I ended up doing was going into business and identifying as a business person, right? But you could identify as a million different things, but you have to realize how foundational hinging to an identity on something is. And so because of that, you really want to be aware of what it is that it's actually hinged on, because you might think it's just obvious, but what you realize is you could be in an environment, in a situation with 100 other people, and you might not identify the same way that they do, okay? And this isn't like my pronouns are him and he. This is from a real psychological perspective of what verbal semantic foundation are you building your identity upwards. It's very different than like, I'm a she-male, so call me Laserbeam, dress me as Foxtrot or whatever, right? That's very different. So what you're gonna feel when you leave an identity behind is, the first thing is you're gonna know that it's dead. You're gonna know that it doesn't serve you. You're gonna know that it just ain't there anymore, because you're gonna feel really weird, all right? So you're gonna be in a situation and you're gonna be like, you know what? This ain't me anymore. That's it. That's what you're gonna feel like. This ain't me anymore, okay? Now, when you have that happen, you have two options. You can either go, yo, it's not me, I'm gonna bail, or you could go and suppress that and keep reliving the old you. And what you're gonna feel is, if you keep trying to relive the old you, it's almost embarrassing. It's almost below you, because your identity kind of evolved upwards out of that. And so for you to keep pretending that you're smaller than you actually are is actually kind of embarrassing. It kind of messes with your self-esteem, and your self-respect starts to go down, because you're kind of, you're playing smaller than you're psychologically destined to play. You leveled up for real, right? For whatever reason. So the first thing to leave an old identity behind is you got to recognize it already died. All right. And this is very natural. You're going to be like, you know what? This ain't me anymore. Okay. Now, when you have that recognition that it's not you, okay, what you're also going to find is there are going to be a lot of sunk costs, and there's going to be a lot of old threads that keep it alive. Okay. You have to identify what these are one at a time. Okay. This could be a relationship. This could be anything. I mean, literally anything. It could be a job. It could be a role. Right? And the role could be in your job. The role could be socially. The role could be just what you're playing in a character sense. I'm the nice guy. I'm this, right? It could be a role that you take on behaviorally. It could be a role that you take on emotionally. Maybe you're acting sad. Maybe you're just acting angry, but you're not actually angry. Maybe you're acting depressed, but you're not actually depressed. Maybe you're just role playing through something, okay? There's going to be some sunk cost keeping it alive that you got to cut. All right, whatever that may be. It could be a friend group. It could be a social situation. It could be a place that you go. It could be a thing that you do. There's infinite amounts of threads that will keep your old identity alive via sunk cost, okay? Well, doing this is the smart thing to do because that's what I did already. Doing this is the smart thing to do because I already put a year into it. Keeping doing this is the smart thing to do because blah, 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 right? The smart thing to do, newsflash, is fucking stupid, okay? The smart thing on paper, if you keep doing that over and over again, it's going to make your life a living hell. Your life's going to suck. You're going to hate it. It's not going to be amazing, okay? So you have to do the thing that you think is kind of dumb but fills your soul with joy. It's kind of dumb, but it really identifies and aligns with your new identity, okay? Now, your new identity. So here's the interesting part is you're going to basically, your identity, it will shed itself. It will shed itself, right? You don't really have to do anything other than let go of it's a very natural process. So like if a freaking caterpillar, right? If it is ready to become a butterfly, what happens? Well, it goes into its little cocoon, right? Goes into the little cocoon, and then when it's ready, it pops out of the cocoon and it becomes a butterfly, right? It becomes a beautiful butterfly. Very natural process. Now, how dumb would it be if when it was becoming a butterfly, it started grabbing onto the cocoon and it said, no, I'm a caterpillar. I'm a caterpillar. So now it's trying to fly, but it's weighed down by the weight of the cocoon, right? And it would look stupid too. It's like, bro, you got beautiful wings. You're a beautiful butterfly. Let it go, dog. Let it freaking go. Now, in the same way, what's going to happen is your identity is naturally going to transition through the cocoon and you're going to turn into a new butterfly. And all your job is, as a human, is to let go of the things that are the cocoon that used to be. Because here's what's going to happen. When you're going through life, you're going to get into these situations where you're going to basically lock yourself in positionally to an old you, okay? This could be, whatever that is. So we could use my example when I was, the one off the top of my head, when I was an athlete, all right? Okay, I'm an athlete, right? So I'm going to basketball practice. I got basketball shoes. I got basketball whatever. I got a basketball attitude. I look like an athlete. I'm going to the gym. I'm eating athlete food. All these different things come with athlete. Now, naturally, I come to the conclusion that I'm like, this is done. I'm not playing anymore. So at some point, I realized it was over for me psychologically, but I was still in all the stuff, okay? And then I had to make a decision. Do I go to college and play basketball, or do I not go to college and not play basketball, or do I go to college and not play? Like, what am I going to do, okay? But here's the thing. I had all these things that still existed keeping the identity afloat. Like I had basketball friends, okay? I had, we had connects with trainers. I was literally at the college where I play basketball. All this different stuff was happening, okay? And so if I'm like, I'm not going to play basketball anymore. Now I'm not an athlete. Now my target shifts. So it's like, well, what's my new goal? Well, I don't know. So maybe my goal is figuring out what my goal is. So I'm in a phase of my life, in this case, where I need to figure out what the new thing is. Now, at this college, I didn't like anything about it, and I only went because of basketball. But because basketball went away because my identity died, now, the new situation, it makes zero sense for me to stay at this freaking college. I'm a new version of myself. I'm the butterfly existing in a place, in an environment that was only existing and created and chosen because of an old identity that I no longer am. Does that make sense? You've probably experienced this as well. It's a very common situation. I didn't really consciously be like, I'm done being a basketball player. God or the universe or whatever ended my reign as a basketball player, and I accepted it and I moved on. It was just time to move on. I didn't want to do it anymore. Things changed, okay? So I'm in a situation where I'm at this freaking college and it ain't me. So what do? I leave the college, okay? I don't know, and this is what you're going to feel with leaving the identity behind, okay? You're going to feel like it already died. You got to recognize it already died. This is me being like, you know what? Basketball ain't it. You're going to cut the sunk cost, keeping it alive, okay? So for me, it was I chose this college. I did this thing with scholarship. I did all this, I did that, and it just wasn't serving me anymore. So now I'm at this college not playing basketball. What's the point of that? There actually is no point anymore. And I look around, and my entire life is an old sunk cost of what I used to be, what I used to identify as. My whole life, my entire life reflected that. So I'm talking about, some things keeping it alive. How about your whole life? This is a big identity shift, right? My whole life was basketball practice. My whole life was athlete friends. My whole life was it was all oriented towards that. My whole life was that. So I literally had I was a new man with a new psyche, with a new identity, right? And that identity wasn't really latched onto anything in the moment, but it wasn't that. I knew it wasn't basketball player. So I was like, you know what? I don't know who I am or what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go, but I know that is not me anymore. So what I'm going to do is remove myself from that situation to allow myself to explore and find out where I'm going next, right? And that's usually how life is going to be. You know exactly what you don't want, but you don't know where you're going. So people think that a lot of times you're striving for a goal in life. It's not really like that. Usually you're just pushing off of something that you know you're not in the opposite direction, okay? But the nice thing is there is a foundation to push off of. There's leverage there because you're kicking away to something new, okay? Which is great because it gives you a orientation directionally of where to go. It's like, hey, I don't know where I'm going, but I know it's not that way, so let me try in the opposite direction, okay? So I had to let all of this go. So I dropped out of the college. I left. I just stopped talking to a lot of friends, right? Because all we did was talk basketball. What am I going to do? I don't want to play basketball anymore, right? So it wasn't serving me anymore. My whole life did a pivot, all right? So that was it. Now, lastly, settle into your new lifestyle and your new mindset and hook progress on you. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean? What I mean is, at this point, I didn't know what I wanted to, but I knew it wasn't basketball. Okay? So what did I do? I knew, hey, the one thing that I know is true for me right now is I gotta let go of these cocoon pieces that are stopping my new butterfly thing from going. Okay? So I was like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, but what I do know is it's not basketball anymore, it's not this, it's not that. Okay? So you gotta let it go. So I removed myself from all of those things. Now, there's a limbo state here because once that all is removed, that is a step forward. Now, people have a hard time with this because they think, oh my gosh, well, I did all this. It's sunk cost, right? Sunk cost is when you feel like you can't quit something because of all the time, attention, and energy you've already plowed into it, all right? But guess what? Sunk cost only exists. Sunk cost is fake when it comes to new identities, okay? Because if this is a version of you that's going this way, but then that version dies and now you're a completely new person and it wants to go this way, exploding this to go this way is actually a step forward. So it looks on paper to people around you and to the old you that you're destroying everything that you had built on a certain whatever, but to the new you, that is actually the first step. That is you shedding the cocoon to rise anew, okay? And your life, if you're psychologically developing properly, in my humble opinion, is a lot of these transitions over and over again that you continually evolve out of over and over and over and over again. Okay, it's very healthy and it's fun and it's the color of life to me personally to evolve into new things over and over and over again and not to get too hung up on any specific thing. Okay, when people meet me in real life, they don't know I used to play basketball. When people meet me in real life, they don't know I had a social following. When people meet me in real life, they probably don't even know I have a business. They don't really know anything about me because they just get Grant. Okay, and then if they ask me different things, sure, I'll answer questions. But I lead spiritually and I lead with myself. I don't know how else to say it. I don't lead with these other things that aren't me, okay? Because how I get my value is me. How I get my validation is through me. Am I keeping my own promises to myself? Am I attacking things in life that I like, that I can respect? Am I chasing my dreams in the way that I want to, okay? Those are the things that I get value with. Those are the things I lead with. Now, settling into the new lifestyle and the mindset, okay? I was not an athlete anymore. So I had to ask myself, how do I want to view the world? What lens do I want to start looking through? Who do I want to become, okay? And I thought about what I wanted to do, and I wanted to make money. Now, a lot of you guys know this, but I had a very brief rap career. And I thought I could like get famous making music, because basically I launched these 2 songs in college and they kind of went viral. And then somebody was playing it at a party and I was like, how did you find this song? And they're like, I just heard it on SoundCloud or whatever. And I was like, well, it's crazy. So that made me believe I could get famous with music. And I still believe I could, by the way, and I might, have a side quest eventually, but I took like 2 years and I was just making a bunch of music. So because I'm super creative and I also wanted to make money, but I was like, And then I had a moment anyway where I was like, man, if I'm a 30-year-old failed rapper, I can't live with that. But if at least I do business, learn how to make money, I can actually live with that. So then I was like, okay, business and learning business does sound interesting. So then I started learning that, right? Then my identity went, okay, I don't know what I am, but I know I'm going to go this direction and start learning business because that sounds interesting and exciting based on, and this is the whole point, based on where my psyche now is, based on what I'm now interested in, based on where I'm at now, okay? That's it. Now, a lot of people, they can't handle killing the old version of themselves because of sunk cost. Oh man, well I did this and this and I climbed this ladder and I did that. The only reason that you're going to get stuck with this transition here is if your identity and your validation is hung up on that thing. Okay? That's it, right? Now, if you have it hung up on yourself, you can transition out of these so easily because you don't give a fuck about what the hell it's hung up on. Okay? That's it. You can lose your money. Who cares? You could, you could stop posting on the internet. Who cares? You could name X or Y or Z. Who cares? Because it's hinged on you. It's hinged on your person, who you are in your soul. Okay? But people have a very hard time of letting go of the one little thing of validation that they have because they aren't confident enough in their own way of seeing the world and they don't hinge their own validation on their own fucking metrics, right? That's just how it is. So, there's a lot of scribbles here, but this part is very simple, It's just once you've left this behind, once you've accepted it and you've cut away everything that's holding you back, all right? All you have left here is just settling in, all right? Now, the nice part about this, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is just going to give you that next step, okay? This is a very exploratory process of, you know what? I don't know what I want yet, but let me just see how I feel, okay? Then what's going to happen is you're just going to try a bunch of stuff out. You're going to live, you're going to vibe. Something's going to catch your attention, and then all you can really do is go towards that thing, see if you like it, and if the answer is yes, play with it, try on the hat, and if the answer is no, then you don't have to do that, okay? And then what happens? You're going to go through this process so many times that you're going to take bits and pieces of everything that you've liked, and you're going to disregard everything that you don't like, and you're going to end up being a very unique person that isn't constructed based on some fantasy of who you want to become, but more so it's revealed to you based on what you've liked and what you've resonated with, okay? Now, what I forgot to mention too, when I did this transition when I was 18, I also went Buddhist for a year. A lot of people don't know this. I went Buddhist for a year and I went vegan for a year, right? Just to try it out. And so obviously I ended up not doing the vegan stuff forever, but there's a lot of Buddhist principles, a lot of Eastern ways of thinking that I've incorporated into the way that I see the world, okay? A lot of people, if they hear me speak or they hear me, give my perspective on something, and they're familiar with Eastern thinking, they are going to see the infusion of Buddhism and Eastern thinking and Eastern ways of viewing the world into a lot of my ideas and how I operate, because that used to be a part of me, all right? But again, I don't identify with any of that anymore. But I do understand, and I have incorporated pieces of all those things into me, and so I am pieces of all those different things, but I am the larger whole that is Grant, that brings those things with me, that I can choose what I identify as, what to exaggerate, what to highlight, what to amplify via narrative, what to take away via narrative, to help me achieve the desired goal in the moment, okay? You choose your goal, whatever you want to achieve. You can pull the levers and push the levers and play with different stories and tell yourself different things to actually help you achieve the goal. Okay, so you got to be aware. What are you telling yourself from a narrative perspective, and what are you actually identifying with? Because a lot of the times, what you're identifying with is keeping you caught in the sunk cost haze, and it probably isn't helping you. I see people all the time. I'm depressed. Imagine identifying with a emotion. Emotions come and they go. No emotion is forever. That's literally emotional law. And you're going to identify with something that is impermanent, with something that's here today, gone tomorrow, all right? And then once they identify with it, their brain, through confirmation bias, is going to seek out that to be true, so they're literally recreating unconsciously that depressed state over and over again while they simultaneously identify with it, which creates this confirmation feedback loop that just spins them into a person that is giving away their power to a ghost, all right? Don't let that be you. Leave your identity behind if it feels like you need to, and have the confidence to trust your own intuition when the identity should go away, and then also trust your intuition on how to move out of that. Because again, God gave you the whole GPS system, the universe gave you the whole GPS system, everything's inside of you, you already know what to do, you already know how it is and where to go, you just got to trust it, all right? Love you, peace.